This is BofC Live, the video and podcast series of Business of Cannabis. Find out all that we do at businessofcannabis.com. Coming up on our BofC Live podcast conversation, we'll connect with Dan Sutton. He is the CEO of Tantalus Labs, a premium cannabis producer in Maple Ridge, British Columbia. Sutton recently made cannabis news by posting a corporate update via a Twitter thread that shared his company's successes over the past year. We wanted to connect with him to talk about the post, about Tantalus's year in review, and what he expects from the future of Canadian cannabis. Here's this conversation with Dan Sutton. Dan Sutton, thanks for being here.
Jay, always a pleasure. Great to be here.
It's funny is probably not the word, but it'll always be, I think, our last interview or our first interview once everything shut down during the pandemic. You and I connected. You talked about what it might mean for you, for the industry. I haven't really gone back and watched or listened to it, so we're gonna forget about that. It seems so fucking long ago, but we're here now. It's 2022. Recently, you posted a lot of information about Tantalus and sort of the path that you're on and where you are today. Talk a little bit about that thread you posted, because, well, I found it fascinating and I think others did too.
Well, I appreciate it. And that thread was definitely a humble brag on behalf of my team. Tantalus Labs just had a breakout fourth quarter. We actually had quarter over quarter revenue growth of 86%, which as a smaller revenue company, it's easier to achieve. But I think it still puts us in the running for one of the fastest growing cannabis companies in Canada today. And what was interesting to me as I reflect on the last year of 2021, which was a grind for every human on earth, as well as any business operator and operations team and cultivator and everyone in the cannabis industry has been especially up against it. We didn't have access to a whole bunch of capital to inject. The market's not exactly excited about cannabis companies as of right now. And thus we had to do it the old fashioned way, roll up our sleeves, figure out what our customers want, continue to iterate on that kind of quality promise, and make sure we're putting high potency, high moisture content, high terpene cannabis in people's hands. Sounds so simple when you say it that way, but it really was the culmination of a strategic planning process that lasted probably the first couple of quarters, and then implementation, block and tackle, steady Eddie day after day for the second two. But I think the message that I wanted to put out with that tweet thread and that I really want to put out today is this is not rocket science. If you have a cannabis company that's oriented towards flower and pre-rolls, you really can deliver financial results with investing in your culture around how much you care about the details and investing in that end product quality in a way that your customers can tangibly feel. So I'm really proud of us, and I'm proud of the little ankle biters that are coming out of the woodwork to snatch up market share from some of the larger companies that have had a really tough time holding on to their market share. 2022 is going to be a year of substantial transition for the cannabis industry in Canada. And I really believe and hope that it will be a transition from large, centralized, big brands towards smaller craft operators. I may be a little bit idealistic in that because those big guys have hundreds of millions in their treasuries and they're not going anywhere. But I think Tantalus Labs is a great case study in how you can deliver value for customers, and you'll deliver value in your financials as well.
I want to ask you, so the ankle biter comment I like, but I want to even go back further, even pre-legalization. Like, were people just missing the mark of what consumers wanted, or was it a bit of like not being able to identify the market because there was no data? Like, you guys iterated, you created the products people want, like that I get, but even from an industry wide, like it seems now the mark is being hit by people like you and some others, but like, was it just naivete or just bad thinking or chasing money? Like, why are we hitting this stride now?
Yeah, great question. And I mean, I can speak from the perspective of Tantalus Labs. And so I think in the illicit market in British Columbia, which I've had, a lot of focus on certainly since before we launched Tantalus Labs, and I purchased from since I was a teenager, it's easy to forget that it wasn't like every grower was kicking ass and taking names. There was a handful of really reputable operators that continued to deliver quality harvests time and again. Now, those operators were far from building in the open, right? And so at the advent of legalization, all of a sudden we had intense consumer scrutiny on every lot, every package date. You have some dry product that ships, you're going to be hearing about it. You know, complaints had a forum. You could actually say, I'm going to complain to my retailer, that retailer is going to pass it on to my territory rep. I'm going to complain to a distributor, and that's going to continue to go on. So for Talent Labs case, we had a lot of amazing harvests. We delivered genetics that were exclusive, and we had some stuff that didn't hit the mark. And I think that that was really especially true in the late stages of 2020 and early 2021. And with the advent of lab testing, a few 18% harvests, and you're looking at your whole business being like, it doesn't matter how good my sales team is, it doesn't matter how good my social media strategy is. Consumers really want to see those high potency numbers, which is sort of evolving, and we're getting kind of more terpene interested parties and things like that. But I think building an airplane as it's flying, combined with having to do that with the intense public scrutiny of things like Reddit forums and Twitter and all that kind of stuff, it's hard to be perfect. It's impossible to be perfect. We haven't seen anybody be perfect as of yet. And so for those of us that were kind of crashing through the brambles and clearing the way in the very early stages, I mean, we were one of the first companies to launch in BC, Ontario, all those kinds of things. We were kind of the whipping boy for everybody who didn't really love their product as much as they did their illicit market operators, who fairly enough have a very light burden of accountability or regulatory standard or however. But there's no doubt in my mind that I want to put cannabis in people's hands that people value as much as some of the finest cannabis they've ever consumed. That will be an ongoing discipline for Channel Labs. We approach that with humility. You got to be like, well, we had a good harvest last time. How do we make it better next time? And that mentality is really what saw us through last year.
I want to ask you a question because we are 3 years in. We are told that consumers want 20% THC plus, the high potency stuff, right? But what role do like the provinces, the provincial distributors play in that? Because they're actually putting that, they're making that mandate on suppliers and LPs and producers, whereas consumers may want something broader, right? But they're actually culling the field based on what they like what comes first? Is it the provincial distributor saying we only want 20% plus, or is it consumers saying we only want 20% plus, but also that happens to be the only thing on the shelf? Like, I don't know, how do we evolve from this, or where do you think that is coming from, or is it all the places feeding into the same, information? I don't know.
Well, first of all, I will say we have seen balanced offerings really start to proliferate, which has been pretty cool. Tantalus Labs has been backing our Harlequin, especially pre-rolls from day one. If you're a beginner user, if you want a lighter experience, if you want a more sort of CBD, THC balanced body feel, I don't even know how much I can say on the effect based on our Health Canada obligations. That started to gain a lot of traction in BC. Then it started to blow up in Alberta. Then it started to blow up in Saskatchewan. I think we're just about to get it over to Ontario. We've had it there historically, and we're bringing it back, pre-rolls. And so people are starting to understand there's different paths that you can take. Now, all that said, that may be 2% or 3% or 5% of the market. It's not really that substantial. And so I think it is very much chicken and an egg scenario. And I lock horns with the distributors on a consistent basis. I'm not going to hang our dirty laundry out here. They're actually trying their best, and they're highly, highly datafied. That's true of BC, Alberta, everyone, Ontario especially, and it's a double-edged sword. It means that they're looking at historic trends to predict future price action. And I think what that means is if you've had a SKU that blows up and does really well, then they're more apt to backfill that SKU. If you have a SKU that's struggled or had stockouts, which is a big question mark for us, we struggle a lot with stockouts, the data makes it look like it hasn't done that well. I'm like, yeah, it hasn't done that well week over week because there's zero inventory, and those kinds of things can really stunt, especially a small producer's momentum. So I think that the distributors have been substantially burned by large company channel stuffing. They say, we know this is going to move. We know this is going to be awesome. We got a huge marketing plan. We're going to have boots in every store in Ontario selling this stuff. And then it doesn't work and it doesn't move. And so everybody's playing a little bit gingerly, but the data doesn't lie. And it is true that the average consumer in Canada is really at an optimization point between THC and price. If you can get high THC for medium or low price, that is what distributors know that will sell. I think it's unfortunate. It washes over a lot of more subjective and artistic and interpretive value propositions that producers can bring. But no matter what we're seeing on social media, the average consumer in Canada is absolutely seeking high THC at medium to low price.
Yeah, it's so interesting to watch all of this unfold, but also watch other markets unfold. And I wonder how much sort of is analogous, or you watch from what's happened, like in California, right? They've had supply chain challenges. That's across the board, almost everywhere. That's COVID related, whatever. But like even what consumer demand looks like over a time horizon, like how closely do you pay attention to what sort of other more established markets look like in California and Colorado? Like, do you pay attention, but like, does it influence sort of what you're doing, or is it strictly what is selling in Canada across our most important markets?
Yeah, I mean, I went down to Cali in October and hung out at a bunch of stores, met a bunch of people, and I've got good relationships down there with cultivators, with retailers. We're paying close attention to data. I mean, the data is really valuable on the legal side, but you have to keep in mind, California still has similar statistics to Canada in terms of black market, illicit market capture, and it could be 50-50. I have some people that suggest that in concentrates, it's more like 70-30 illicit market, which is really where the risk area comes in, because unregulated concentrates are where you have your highest risk of like concentrations of heavy metals and butane, residual butane, and those kinds of things. And so like they have not really succeeded in displacing their illicit market. They have succeeded in creating a huge amount of new businesses, and many of those businesses are suffering and on their way to failure right now. And we just had Gavin Newsom, their governor, suggest that they do need to have substantial tax reform, substantial regulatory reform if they're going to want to make a success. Now, I think from a product mix perspective, we do get good insights from California. You go into any store on Abbot Kinney, which is like probably the most premium cannabis you could pay for in LA, or close to that, in maybe Hollywood too. You see a lot of high THC infused pre-rolls. Maybe like 30-40% of the pre-rolls in the stores are high THC infused, to the extent of like 40, 50, 60% THC with distillate in there, dipped in hash, all kinds of stuff. I'm like, first of all, who are smoking these things? Because if I had one hit of that thing, it would be sitting on my ass for sure, and I'd smoke a fair amount of cannabis. And so I think that's an interesting segment. We've got some different regulatory hurdles to approach that segment, but high THC driving premium price purchases is definitely happening in California as it is here. So I don't know. I think there are also really beautiful like artisan offerings that are focused way more on how it was grown, who it was grown by, where the genetics came from, and that story will continue to break out to a niche market. But for sort of broad sweeping brand success, THC is still the metric. Jay, I hate to be the guy to tell you.
Okay, hey, that's why I asked you the question. Dan, I appreciate always your openness, transparency, certainly through Twitter, but also through here. I encourage everybody to follow you because you always post interesting things. I'll post the tweet I'm talking about as we post this video. And nice to connect. Hopefully we'll see you, not too long from now.
Always a pleasure, Jay. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Thanks, Dan. That was Dan Sutton from Tantalus Labs. If you like this program, please subscribe to this YouTube channel or to wherever you heard the podcast. It helps support the work we do. We're able to do what we do because of ongoing partnerships with Alterna Savings, Cannabis at Work, Cannabis Benchmarks, Can Delta, Gallagher, Headset, and Torque and Maine. Find out all that we do at businessofcannabis.com.